I'm Gerd Leonhard, Futurist. Welcome to the World by 2030. Another episode. I am talking to Anton, Musgrave, my good friend and colleague from Cape Town, South Africa. We are, in fact, in Cape Town, South Africa. Lucky us.
On a beautiful day today.
Yeah, it's beautiful today, and we're talking about the future. And today we're talking about what does it mean to be a futurist, and what in the world is a futurist, and why did we choose it, if we did, and what does it actually mean? So I'll pass over to Anton. Maybe you can start with what in the world is a futurist?
Good. I sometimes wonder that myself. It's so confusing at times, at least. But in essence, the name captures the spirit of it. It's a person with a passion, I think, for understanding what lies beyond the horizon, without the ability to predict what that may be. But someone who is keenly looking for signals from the future, messages from the future, and synthesizing these signals into a story about the future that explains the opportunities and what the world might be like. And for me, personally, it's very much about helping leaders enter these tough conversations, because they very rarely do in the boardroom, given the nature of operating business of today. It's short-term focused. And the futurist needs to be really good at helping leaders lift their heads, see over the horizon, and contemplate potential outcomes out there and what they may mean for whatever it is that they're doing.
So there are lots of pieces to it. I mean, lots of moving parts to it, but I always say it's really about insights and foresights.
Correct.
And intuition. I think Jeff Bezos once said that he decides on every project and every action that he does based on data and information and all that stuff. But in the end, it's all his gut feel, right? And intuition, which was very honest. You know, I think that really this is what humans do best. And this is why I don't think ChatGPT can make a good futurist, if it ever could actually say something about the future. But really, it's about the insights and the foresights. And I always say my job is to travel into the future, 5, 10 years, maybe longer sometimes, and then to come back with what I've seen.
Correct.
And then put it on the table and say, I'm seeing, it's the end of oil. The end of oil is coming.
Yep.
Right? You may not see that because, you're Aramco or whatever, right?
You may not want to see it.
You might not want to see that, but it's kind of like a therapist. And many times when I speak to executives or board members and CEOs and individuals, it's kind of like being a future therapist, I say. Yeah. So I'm breaking this from the future, and I'm saying, clearly, what we're seeing here, like I did in the music business, music will be on the cloud. And here we are in 1999, when I got started, and I'm saying, what in the world are you talking about? The cloud. We hate the cloud. We hate the internet.
What is the cloud?
Go away. Nobody knows what the cloud is. And today, this is what we have. So to create this foresight is based on intuition, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of these kind of things. To me, it's very important not to confuse that with prediction.
Absolutely not. I mean, they're two very, very different things. And
right.
It's about predictions, about standing in the present, saying what sequence of events are going to happen and the outcome they're going to lead to.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely not what any self-respecting futurist should be doing.
Well, there were people that were good at it. For example, Buckminster Fuller, Arthur C. Clarke, 50 years ago. But today, I think the major problem is, I think if you're talking about prediction, is that the time frame is so crunched.
It's with the acceleration of speed of everything. So in our language, we talk about how do you build memories of the future? Well, take yourself there. Just close your eyes, take yourself 10 years out, and imagine, what does it mean when your 14-year-old daughter is running a listed company with her current sort of behavior as a child? Put that in a leadership role and say, what does that mean for us? And develop these memories of these futures, and then come back from the future and then reassess your present. And of course, obviously, the decisions you're taking tomorrow about what you're going to do, how you're going to allocate capital, what people you're going to employ, what are your core capabilities, and so forth, to create optionality about the future. Because one thing I've also learned over 32 years is that whatever future view you hold will likely be wrong in one or more ways.
Well, I think here's the question to the audience. I think if you can't answer the question, what does 2030 look like in my life? In the world, in my company, if you don't have an answer where you have a hunch on what it looks like, then you got to go hunting, right? You got to go and say, okay, by 2030, the world is going to look like this, and according to my view, and you develop that hunch not just by watching, stuff on Netflix or Black Mirror or whatever you're watching. You develop the hunch by reading, by talking to people, by creating conversations, And when you have a hunch that something will happen, it can grow over time. It becomes a conviction.
Yes.
Right. And then you say, okay, it's quite clear to me this is what's going to happen. And then you make different decisions.
Exactly.
And I
right.
think this is the important part, is that you feel secure about your hunch. Like, I think this is the most important thing for leaders. You have to feel secure about your intuition and your hunches to act on it. And also, a company that doesn't allow people to have hunches and intuition is bound to fail now, because the speed is so vastly different.
The speed and the amplitude of the impact is so different. But what people make a big mistake around, Gerd, in my experience, is when you talk about the hunch, it sounds a bit fluffy, hocus pocus. It's not that. It's a sense, it's an intuition, it's a gut feel. But then you need to validate that en route to the destination. And so you say, these are the 4 or 5 core signals telling me that the hunch is going to be correct or has a high probability of being correct.
And that's the foresight thing, for me, it's very much like when you do online dating. I don't do much online dating, these days. I'm
you can't admit to it anyway.
I'm married, but I'm going to investigate it. So when you do online dating, you give it all the data about what you're looking for. But this is very explicit, height or whatever it is, right? And you can then find the perfect person that matches the profile based on, 500 data points, right? But then when you go the date, the reality is like 4 seconds, you realize it's all just not true, right? Or it's good data, but it's still not true. And I think foresights are exactly like this. You have all the data, right?
The other dimension is you go on this date and it just intuitively feels wrong. Everything may be right, it might tick all the boxes, but for you in that moment, it's wrong.
And this is kind of what's happening with data and foresight. I think I look at a lot of data, I read lots of reports and all that stuff, but I always say, if you torture data long enough, it will confess to anything. So I'm looking at this data and saying, it's totally clear, people are going to go into virtuality and live in the metaverse. But when you look at it from a wider point of view of emotions, understanding, intuition, spirituality, consciousness, whatever, human agency, it is completely different. And I think this is where the art of intuition comes in. Steve Jobs said basically what he wants to do with Apple, rest in peace, of course, is the combination of art and technology, right? And the art is also understanding what is coming and then translating it back into today. That's another art yet.
Yeah.
Because you may understand what's coming, but you can't explain it.
Yeah.
Right?
For me, also, I think what's really, really important, and when I think back to my days as a futurist 32 years ago, I'll never forget the first YouTube clip I embedded in a PowerPoint presentation. People said, wow. Now, of course, we've all read, way too much in a way. And everyone's got very smart advisors, MBA graduates are everywhere. So what makes the big difference today? And I think, firstly, it's being provoked by a futurist, but it's also then developing the skill to understand what I call the second and third order implications of something that's pretty obvious. If you take mobility, autonomous cars, right? Pretty jolly obvious. Pretty obvious we're going to have fewer car accidents. So what's the non-obvious second or third order implication? Well, fewer people die, but most organ transplants come from people that die. So where are we going to get hearts from to put into people that need them? Right? And then you start saying, okay, well, let's look at augmentative 3D printing, let's look at human tissue manufacturing, etc., and say, well, we're going to 3D print hearts for people. But then you take it even a further layer and you say, all right, so if we have autonomous cars, it means I don't need to stay awake. So think about all those petrol stations en route that used to sell Coca-Cola or Red Bull to keep you awake. They're not going to sell them anymore. Why? Because I don't need to be awake.
They're going to sell chargers.
They're going to sell chargers or new music downloads or whatever it is for what you do in your car.
It's interesting. I think the non-obvious thing is what humans are good at, as opposed to computers. For example, I did ask ChatGPT, the new AI that we're looking at right now, about certain jobs that I was doing, like what is the future of tourism and sustainability. And it was giving me good input. That was very much fact-based. Right? But I can take that and say, okay, I see that it was already on my radar, but I can amplify it and then also look behind this. Yeah?
Now you overlay it. Exactly.
Right? So you're looking at this kind of Maslow pyramid for skills. On the lower part of that pyramid is data, information, and simple knowledge. Machines can have that.
Correct.
Right? So you can ask the AI for data, information, and knowledge, even though that's also wrong many times, but it can cover the lower part of the routine. Yeah? But there's 5 layers on top, which is tacit knowledge, quiet knowledge, understanding, which is complex emotional things, right? And then basically intuition, imagination, consciousness, agency. That's all on top of the pyramid.
Absolutely.
And this is really what you need people for. And that's why I think, as a futurist, I strive to work on that level, not by blinding people with lots of information and flashy stuff, even though I like flashy stuff. But on top of that, basically, well, I wouldn't call it wisdom, but really this is ultimately the key of, like, when you listen to a really brilliant person like Bill Gates, or Deepak Chopra or Dalai Lama, or not to put them in the class,
in the same category.
Right? But you're saying, wow, that's just so profoundly true, and this is what I want to get to.
But what also is manifest about those profoundly true moments is that I always say, like you do, wow. But then 30 seconds later, I say, you idiot, why didn't you think of that? Because it's not rocket science. I mean, as smart as they are, what they're saying actually boils down to simple time to reflect. And if we all gave ourselves that time to reflect, we'd probably come up with a lot of those things.
I use the symbols that I found somewhere from this old radar station in World War I or II, where basically the soldiers are wearing this giant artificial ears.
Yes, that's right.
And this funnel ears. And with that, they can hear the airplane coming. In fact, they had ears that were like, 20
big
feet.
domes.
With tubes going into ears, and there are guys listening like this, because they can hear the airplane coming. And this is kind of what we do, and then we say, yeah, I hear something coming. And, it's funny, it's not just the smart and bright people who hear stuff coming. Sometimes, once I met a taxi driver in Brazil, and we were talking about stuff, and I mentioned to him that I was talking about the future, right? And then he says to me, he points outside as we're driving. He says, "This is real life. It's not in here."
Yeah,
he says,
and he points to his cell
points
phone.
to the mobile phone. I'm like, shit, yeah, that's true. It's like profoundly true. That real life is not in the box. It's not on the screen. It's out there. And then
my favorite example of that is when I say to an executive team, you pay a big four consultancy millions of dollars to define the customer of the future, and they all nod. And I say, tell me, when last did you have a conversation with your kids around the dinner table? But then go to your colleagues the next morning and say, just let me share with you what my daughter and my son said last night. They're only 7, by the way. But let's just debate what this means for the future of our business.
Yeah, to have the openness and to understand.
Exactly.
Right?
And you get this nervous giggle in the room because they realize that the signals from the future don't have to come from just a futurist or an article or Bill Gates. They're around us.
And the other thing is that they shouldn't be just intellectual. This
Absolutely.
is another one of those really interesting things when you do speeches or when you talk to clients, is they tend to intellectualize, they want proof, with facts and statistics, but intellectualize things really doesn't move the needle. In the end, when you're pitching somebody for an investment or when you're talking to your team, it's all going to be about the things are not so much intellectual, but on a different level, on an inside level. And
well, you need to bring it back to a real business impact. If it's a business client, it's a business engagement, it's all very well having the epiphany about the future. But we need to connect that, whether it's an insight or something exciting at an emotional level, but bring that back to the reality of what that means today and how we can create it. And that's how you bridge that gap, because I think Wall Street's got a lot to answer for. The way it's forced executives to think in 3 to 4 month cycles about everything is crazy. And that's what we do, is take people out into the future, get them excited, get the goosebumps about the art of the possible, but then have a way of intelligently connecting that back to, so what does it mean and how can I change things tomorrow that will create that optionality for me, no matter what the future is.
Very good point. We cut here. Thanks very much. I'm Gerd Leonhard, and this is Anton Musgrave from we're in beautiful Cape Town, South Africa.
Good. I'm not hearing you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Well, this is the number one mistake on the live show. You forgot to unmute you. I'm going to have to pay a heavy penalty for this one. Millions of people out there waiting for us to start, and then the mute button is on. Anyway, it's great to be here with you again. And we had a great session in Cape Town. Just the other day, a few days ago, actually, we were in France recording the next 6 or 7 episodes of The World by 2030. And if you like the show, we are looking for partners for distribution. So if you have any ideas on who would like to carry the show on some online channel, of course, CNN is also a good option, I suppose. maybe MTV, I don't know. Anyway, if you have any ideas, then let us know what's happening. And we're obviously experimenting with different formats and different things. So, Anton, great to have you here. We're going to go into the first question. This is Marshall Kirkpatrick. He's actually a futurist himself, and I've connected with Marshall a few times in the past. Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking the questions. I'm going to bring it in, the question, to see if we can actually see it, right? Yes. So, speaking about South Africa, a country famous for injustice and struggle, what are some of the best practices for harvesting insights from the past and to present that we ensure a more positive, more just future? Thank you, Marshall.
Thank you, Marshall. That's a huge question, and I'm going to perhaps disappoint you, but hopefully give you another perspective, if you like. And I'll take my mind back to the days before our first democratic election in the early 1990s. And South Africa was faced with enormous divergence of views. We had very polarized, if you like, people around the negotiating table, polarized in terms of their perspectives, their policies, their ambitions for the country and more. And no progress was being made until one of the negotiators asked this question. And the question simply was, what kind of country do we want our children to grow up in? And suddenly everyone from these diversely polarized backgrounds actually aligned very quickly around the exact same criteria of the ideal country for their children. In other words, they were focused on the future. They stepped away from all the insights, injustices, memories, painful memories of the past, focused their energy on an ideal outcome, if you like, 10, 20 years hence, and suddenly realized they were all saying the same thing. In my experience with business leaders, when we're sitting in a room doing strategy, it's not different at all. Very often the strategy conversation starts with a SWOT analysis on your current or immediate past capabilities. It rests on an analysis of your income statement for the last 2 or 3 years, your competitor analysis and more. And of course, all of that research and all of that focus on the immediate past and the present limits one's thinking and the scale of one's aspiration. And so I found it way more powerful to take the executive team into a place in the future, get them to ideate, if you like, an ideal destination, get them excited at an emotional level first and then an intellectual level about that destination, and then ask the question, how did we do this? The moment we say in South Africa, how do we, what should we do, what can we do, we invest ourselves in the present and we constrain our ability to see beyond and be creative beyond all of those painful memories of the past. In the boardroom, exactly the same thing. The things that we tried 4 and 5 years ago left painful scars on our backs, and so we don't think we can go down that road of innovation again. And that's entirely limiting. So I think, yes, obviously memories of recent past and things we want to avoid filter into the conversation, but focus the question around what's our ideal destination as a nation, no matter where we are in that nation today in 2023, and then have that conversation. And I suspect it's going to be much more liberating, much more powerful, and one will create alignment a lot more quickly. So that's my perspective, Marshall, on a very tough and very relevant question today.
Thanks, Anton. I mean, maybe I should comment a little bit in comparison to Switzerland and South Africa. It's an interesting angle. You know, every time I go to South Africa, I feel that people are hungry for the future. They are open to discussing every possible angle. They have very low hierarchy. They're very entrepreneurial. And this is in a place that has so many problems. It's also very beautiful, but it's completely different than Switzerland in that sense that it's also very beautiful here. But the hunger to really change and to look at the future is much, much less. So it's kind of a paradox, you know, when you look at South Africa, where everything is kind of difficult, you know, power is cutting out and, you know, political circumstances are weird and all the regulation that you don't understand and you know, all of these issues that are piling up. And in Switzerland, where everything is working fine and great, and we don't have the spirit. And I think this is really something about the future that is inherent in somehow in South Africa. It's also a place where we have some of the biggest future universities like Stellenbosch in the world, together with Finland, which has a huge futurist movement. Here in Switzerland, the future is scary, and therefore rather not discussed. And I don't understand why that is, but it's a cultural thing. We're kind of saturated and well off, and not really looking to take a leap. While in South Africa, every time I go there, I feel like people are ready to say, "Well, we've got to do something big here." We have this great opportunity, and things aren't working, and we can improve them like this. And it's I don't know, maybe it's more Darwinistic. I don't know.
I think it's not just South Africa, right? If I look at the world, in all the parts of the world, there's lots of stress, there's lots of anxiety, and lots of big issues. And so Maria Ponce asks the question, is there an active intention to transmit positivism or negativism? And my view is you can only get humans to perform at an exceptional level if they're captured by something exciting. And so as a species on this planet, whether you're in Ukraine or America or England or France, they're arguing about working for 2 years longer because of, retirement age needs to be extended, etc. We need to get excited about the future. Positivism is the only thing that's going to stimulate humans to come up with creative answers to some of the vexed questions the world is facing right now. And let's, talk about AI is obviously topical. It's kind of almost getting too much at the moment. But if we are negative about this new tool that we have created to help solve the problems, then the wrong outcomes will probably eventuate. But if we are optimistic and positive about its potential to help us solve the challenges of the planet in creative ways, I think we have a higher chance of a better outcome. So I don't think it's for me, it's absolutely no debate. I mean, I am an inherent positive person, optimistic person anyway. But if I'm to be excited about all the trials and tribulations, wow, I need to be positive about something to get me through the tough parts.
Well, I like the Gramsci quote, Antonio Gramsci, Italian poet, I think 200 years ago. And he said it's about pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the mind. And I would like to add optimism of the heart. Because, I think we can be pessimists intellectually and say, no, that's not going to work, or, I have contradictory facts and so on and so on. But we need to remain hopeful because, as Kevin Kelly says, I like a lot of quotes, but Kevin Kelly is a good guy to quote. He says, we should be optimistic, not because we have less trouble and less problems, but we have more capacity to solve them. And I think that's the right approach. We should not be blue-eyed, starry-eyed and say, oh, the great future, great technology, great AI, great robots, great singularity, great Gerd. That's not that simple. We need to be not naive. But on the other hand, I think right now the focus has been so much on the bad things. We can't seem to solve climate change. We have this despots. The wrong people are winning. We have this weird kind of semi-war scenario, real war scenario, of course. But it's like dragging the world down, right? And I think to have a positive view is so important. And the future is made by optimists. Right? The future is not made by people who say, "Oh yes, but."
Absolutely right. And I think we must also remember the big debate right now is around the impact on jobs by artificial intelligence, automation, robots. And Skip Bowman says, how do we balance the opportunities with a sort of a pragmatic approach to the firestorm that's going to happen in the office job market, if you like? Well, it's not only the office job market. I think it's many areas of employment, Skip. And the reality is, I think let's be honest, there's definitely going to be disruption of many, many, many jobs in many domains. But it's up to us to ask ourselves the question, how many of those actually deserve not to be automated? And, and if the job requires no independent thought, creativity, curiosity, etc., then let's automate it. I don't think there are too many humans in the accounts department of large companies that balance invoices, that are stimulated, inspired, and excited by what they do every day. So automate all of that, and then humans do exciting things that are valuable.
Yeah, of course, this is a big debate about automation, but I think really what's happening is that artificial intelligence, or what I call IA, intelligent assistance, really, is coming for knowledge workers. It's no longer the office workers, it's the factory workers, and maybe the drivers and the call centers. It's the knowledge workers.
Yeah.
And the good news is we can be 4, 5, 10 times as efficient and fast and effective using these kind of tools. Does that mean I'm going to work 10x just to make up the time, or fire the other 9 people to get rid of them, or do I get to work less for the same money? Those are big questions. And we have to ask this question and say, is it just about more productivity for more profit? Because if that is the case, then we're doomed. If we can use this to create productivity that floods out to everyone, well, rising tide floats all boats, right? And we have more money, we have more jobs, we have people doing the jobs they want, and maybe we have in 10 years people working only 3 or 4 hours a day, as has been envisioned in France for a long time, or 4 days a week for the same money. So the question is not so much about all of these things, which jobs are coming and going, but also a larger story that work by itself is not going to be a center of our lives in 10, 15 years, because we will have abundant things of making things happen without working around the clock, and that's also very important to realize. And I think it's really scary for a lot of people when you have a job that's a little bit routine, commodity work. Then right now you're worried, and I think politicians need to pick up on this, and CEOs and civil societies to create a mechanism of hope, to figure out, first maybe there's a way of cross-subsidizing new jobs, like we've had in agriculture and so on. But, we have to figure this out together. We can't just go forward and say, oh, good, great, the telecom company is 500% more effective, so, it only has 1/10 of the employees. That's not a good solution.
Good. I mean, you'll know that all of the trials that are running globally right now across industries around the ability to do the same amount, create the same amount of output on 4 days of work at no reduction in salary have been overwhelmingly positive. So, who says we need to work 5 days a week? Where did that come from? Well, right at the start of the industrial age. So, it's time to review that. But I do think, Skip, you've raised the question about the new social contract. I think the old days in the old world where, labor produced effort, paid tax, and with that tax, government provided for retirement, for healthcare, for education, for infrastructure, etc. I think that is broken. And I do think we're going to re-examine the social contract between labor, government, and business. And whether that results in a universal minimum wage, or again being experimented with right now, or as Gerd said, what is the new formula for recognition of value? And it can't just be about increasing profits for shareholders all the time. So I do think we're going to have to reimagine that completely. The contract between government and business and society is broken. And the next generations of children coming through are wanting different things. They're wanting a different form of balance between their personal aspirations with their families and work and so forth. And then, we have all these new tools to do the drudgy, boring work. So, let's think about a world that's society 5.0, a wonderfully harmonious blend between smart robots, satisfied, happy human beings, and a planet that actually might just survive our arrival.
Well, Skip, I'm with you on the argument of saying that we have to rewrite how the operating system works in order for that to happen. We have the technological means, we will have the money, I'm sure. We will have the progress, we will have the inventiveness, will we have the wisdom to pull this off? Just the other day, 4 days ago, or 5 days ago, I read an article by Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist, who's one of the leading investors in the world with Anderson Horowitz. And he wrote an article in defense of artificial intelligence. I think why AI is the future, or something like that. And then I responded to it on Twitter saying that, okay, this is a great Silicon Valley centric view about the great hope of capitalism, free capitalism that is unconstrained and unregulated, and just let AI take care of us, that sort of argument. And he blocked me after this, I think. Blocked me on Twitter. So but in any case, this is an argument that we hear in America all the time, is that we should just get out of the way and let AI bring about this world, and then use other AI to monitor the AI so that it doesn't get too powerful. And this argument is so flawed in that it puts this kind of freewheeling ultra-capitalist society in the middle, and then hopes that technology will just kind of go along with it. And that really has me worried. You guys got to read the article. I'm going to put a blog post on my blog in a couple of days, rebuffing his arguments. But essentially, this is a really, really interesting angle. So let's go to the other question here from Skip or other comment.
I think that Else has raised the question around hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative, if you like, to the certainty of optimists and pessimists. I honestly don't think that hope is a strategy. I think that the optimistic outcome of our future is in our hands. We need to make choices every single day that will lead to an outcome, and let's make those consciously and productively, and then we need to go and execute against those choices. And that creates hope that the outcome we've chosen will actually happen. But simply to hope for the best cannot be how humans approach all the uncertainties, all the challenges of our current time, and just hope that a good thing will happen. And that's why I agree with Gerd on the AI. We cannot just hope that one AI will monitor and manage the other AI and think that that's all going to be fine. We need to become way more actively involved in choosing the outcomes we want and then executing against those choices.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of work on AI in this show, and you could see it on the other show episodes. And I have a new film coming out called Look Up Now, which is about AI. And in it, we are proposing essentially the creation of an international agency for AI, IAAI, to exactly do this, to figure out how we can harness it, how we can prevent bad side effects, how we can get everybody to play along with certain rules and social contracts. And many people are saying, oh, that's an illusion. People will not play along because, it's China, US, America, India, or Russia. They won't play along. But I think they will. And it has proven to happen in the past. Nuclear agreements, genome editing agreements, CRISPR-Cas9, the ozone agreement, the Montreal agreement, and many others. So it's not unknown to happen. Huh? But I do think the hope thing is important for me personally, because to generate hope and to figure out what is the objective and where could it be going and to envision what it could look like, I think it's a powerful exercise. To have something that may be unattainable, but it's something that we can look at and say, okay, this is a bright star that we could pursue. I realize, of course, that it's hard to work on both sides of this equation. Sometimes you're looking at all of these things are saying, oh, there's no hope, forget it, and other times here it's the opposite. So it can be quite difficult. And let me get that comment back in here from Rebecca, or maybe another one. Let's bring in this LinkedIn user. What a nice name, LinkedIn user. Hello, LinkedIn user. So that's key, in my opinion. Start linking well-being with jobs, not just productivity and profit. This is a tall order. And I think this is only going to happen when and if, and this is my view, the millennials, the Gen Y, will take over. And that is in the next 5-6 years, because they are inheriting the money from our generation. And research shows roughly in Europe and the US and some places like India, about 50% of most of executive jobs and leadership positions will be held by millennials and Gen Ys. And that's completely different than today. And they're going to go into politics too. So that will bring about a huge shift, I think, in what we're pursuing and what we're trying to do here. And that is ultimately the argument. I mean, how can we not change the economy if we're looking to change, why we're doing stuff rather than how we're doing stuff? The big question is why, and what is the purpose of it? So, I see this a big part of my job as a futurist is not to paint a rosy future, but to ask the question why and what and who, and then find answers to create something from it.
Good. I've been asking for a long time now, for many years, to executive teams, how do you think we will measure corporate success in the future? Because in my view, it cannot be about the Wall Street success metrics, which is about market cap, sales volumes, all the quantitative metrics. It needs to be a balance of quantitative and qualitative. And increasingly, those qualitative success criteria are being challenged by employees, by customers, by our children. And so we need to reimagine what the success formula actually is. You know, a few years ago, Jamie Dimon and his roundtable of executives published a manifesto that said, we concede that after decades of business school teachings, the purpose of a company is no longer all about shareholder profit. There's a wider group of interested stakeholders, and everyone needs to be equitably recognized in the journey called business. And I think that's going to lead to a recalibration, if you like. We're entering a world of low return expectations over the next decade or so. Maybe this is the point at which we re-examine the quantitative and qualitative metrics that Wall Street applies, that society applies, that customers and members in the ecosystem of every business require. Certainly, in my experience also, the younger talent that we seek and need in companies to create exciting futures that offer us all hope, those young talent actually have very different demands when it comes to balance, for example, and what they are prepared to sacrifice in pursuit of the company objectives and what they're not prepared to sacrifice. So I see that change happening at an increasing speed.
You know, I've looked at the Business Roundtable as an example quite a bit in the last few years, and it's been encouraging to see the activity, just like the First Mover Coalition in Davos of the tech companies moving towards net zero and so on. It is very difficult for those companies and executives to forge a clear path. For example, BlackRock Partners has been punished by many investors as going too heavily on the sustainability and the ESG thing, and they pulled their money out. And this is very hard because you have two objectives. You have the corporate objective and especially the US stock market, very much driven by returns no matter what. The Aramco objective, you would call it, monetizing no matter what, right? And then you have the human objective. And I think this is a fight that we have right now. What is the objective, And this is why I'm dying to see a European stock market that's going to be based on the 4 Ps, people, planet, purpose, prosperity, where companies list that would pursue that. There's already such a stock market in San Francisco, of course, called the Long-Term Stock Exchange, where I think Asana is listed there, that has a long-term view of prosperity. This is what we need, so that executives would get paid if they tick all 4 boxes, and you have a dividend if all the 4 boxes are ticked. And the whole process is different. And unless we have that, I fear that we're always going to go to a certain point, and then people like the Business Roundtable actually end up opposing, for example, the Build Back Better plan of the administration back then, because they were stuck with their paradigm on the one side wanting to, on the other side not being able to, And this is a really, I see this all the time with companies who are saying, yes, we want to, but we'll get punished. That can't go on.
The essential criteria to that journey, that new journey that we both sort of aspire towards, is going to require that leaders around the world, both business and political leaders, start being honest about some pretty fundamental things. And one of the reasons I think there's been this backlash against greenwashing and ESG is that it's just another acronym that we can hide behind in business and pretend we're doing all the right things. Whereas in fact, our business model is not fundamentally changed. And that's why people are building a rapid level of skepticism around ESG, in the same way that balanced scorecard, triple bottom line, which are concepts that are decades old, did not deliver the anticipated outcomes, because chief executives and stock markets were not honest with the rest of the world about how they're actually committed to changing things. And so there's this paradox, this conflict, this creative conflict between what we all inherently, intuitively know needs to happen, but the realities of structures like stock markets and so forth. And we've just got to start.
Well, then there needs to be a groundswell to fix this problem, because I think this is what's holding us back into making that leap. And it's kind of like, I'm really counting on the millennials and the Gen Y and maybe the zillennials as well to kick some ass here, because for us it's kind of like, we grew up with this and we kind of made our way through this,
Yes.
But to see a better future, we really have to start working on the basic assumption as to why are we doing all these things, profit and growth, and that's it. We have an interesting question here from Christian Stab. Thanks for being here, Christian. So, do you think that human civilization will move into space in the future? In what year? I'll take a first step at this. I think the primary thing here is going to be nuclear fusion, unlimited energy, and of course quantum computing and AI, because if we have nuclear fusion, then we have abundant energy. And with that energy, we can power anything, including the spacecraft that will take the robots and the AI to other planets first. Because you know that they're going to be the first ones that will go and check stuff out. That's going to be too hard. So definitely, I think we are going to be a spacefaring species. There's no doubt about it. We are in that time frame 10 to 15 years away from that reality being fueled by quantum computing, by nuclear fusion, and by all the things that I mean, if we have this unlimited source of energy, we can fly anywhere pretty much, right? We can do all these things. And right now, that's the biggest concern. But I think it's coming. And right now, it's a one-planet species, and that will eventually change. Probably not in our lifetime in a significant way, but you know, things being exponential, who knows? Maybe the bots will go, and they will populate a new planet with many, many baby bots.
Yeah. I'm not going to comment too much on that. I'm still pretty in love with many parts of planet Earth, and you know, I've not seen too much evidence of places I would like to rush to personally. So good. I think you're right from the quantum computing and you know, fusion energy perspective. But I have to still ask myself the question: why on Earth do we want to leave Earth?
Well, because Earth is going to be all messed up, and then we have to have some place to go, right?
Oh,
so
come on, we've got to fix it. We've got to fix it. With all the smart people on this call, we can do it.
We're going to take one more question from Alexandra Sarakin, no, from Taruna, sorry, as she was first. Taruna, what's your view on this race for everyone entering AI and starting from scratch versus converging ecosystems using AI as an accelerator? Yeah, I'm to be honest, I'm quite worried about the race, the AI race that is becoming a race for money, a race for power, a race for military, not just a race for, you know, doing better things like solving cancer. You know, of course, it's the same thing that we're looking at in every possible way. It could, you know, it could be heaven or it could be hell. And I think we really need to have a good look and say, what does AI do now? With employment, with automation, with changing the course of society, with creating fake narratives and deep fakes and all that stuff that's already happening. And what could it be doing in terms of being a black box, being out of control, leading primarily to military advantages? So I'm very much in favor of that international institution of creating a council on AI. But I've said that for 6 or for 7 years since my book. In 2016, we talked about the Digital Ethics Council. That's kind of the same, very similar concept. But I think we're doing this right now. This is really, really happening at a very fast pace, and a lot of people are jumping into the conversation.
I think I want to add just another comment on that question: is how do we use AI to bridge the gap between, you know, big corporates and nimble, agile, young, different thinkers? And I think initially, if you look back at all the other big technological disruptions, there was this race to own the technology. You know, think about telecommunications, the race to own masts, 3G masts for mobile operators. But today already we know that to own the infrastructure is not where the real value lies. And so it's the services we build on top of that infrastructure that eventually become much more valuable. So how do we rapidly make the AI available to everyone and then bridge that gap between the thinkers and the big corporates? I think already Facebook have given, you know, a large part of their AI source code to the open market. And so maybe this time around it'll happen a lot more quickly, I think. If it doesn't, I think the large companies are going to be challenged.
I think, unfortunately, my experience has been with social media that the benefit of social media have not been distributed to everyone, just to the corporations that are social media or run social media, like 6 major cities in the US, where all the Facebook money goes. $150 million profit per day that Facebook makes does not go to the writers, the creators, you know, anyone else, but it just goes there. If that happens with AI, we are in deep trouble. And I think we need to take a good look and say, okay, how can we make this more even? How can we make it more participatory? How can we bring more diversity into it? How can we stipulate what is allowed and what is not allowed. I mean, it's not okay to make fake money and bring it out there, but to impersonate a politician is just fine. And the better you do it, the more people have a good laugh. I think there's something that we need to do without being overly, guarding and restrictive and demanding on more rules. Not everything can be solved with saved with a rule or a tax. Let's not forget, be quite a mission. Yeah.
I mean, we've only been in this world of sort of the focus around AI for literally, the last few months, last 7 months, basically. It's a babe still. It hasn't even learned to walk yet. It's still on liquid foods, this AI thing. There's a long way to go. So it's not too late to use it in the right way, share it with the right people, and so forth.
Yeah, great. So we could talk about this forever, and we will. The next episode of The World by 2030 will be live streamed without a conversation, because we have a special segment on, yet again, how to be a futurist and what a futurist does. And then we're starting with our new series, our new episodes, starting episode 7 with a new kind of design background. And again, we're looking for people to help us reach a larger audience. And if you like the conversation, please do spread the word. Thanks very much for being here. We're going to have an edited version of this conversation on YouTube and on Vimeo, and of course, theworldby2030.com. I'm Gerd Leonhard. This is Anton Musgrave, and thanks very much for watching, and good luck in the future. Live long and prosper.
And let that future be a matter of the right choices, not chance.